This is not breaking news. This is not a scandal. This is not about one person. What you are watching is quieter than that, and far more dangerous. It's the moment when violence stops being an internal decision and starts becoming a trigger, a moment when power redraws the line between what a state can do to its own people and what the outside world claims the right to answer. Nothing has exploded yet. Nothing has officially begun, but a switch has been installed. And once a system builds a switch like this, it doesn't need chaos to flip it. It only needs justification. If you think this is about unrest, or rhetoric, or posturing, you're already one step behind the design. Stay with me, because what's being tested here is not a country. It's a new rulebook, and once it works once, it never stays contained. The mistake is thinking control still lives with leaders, or laws, or borders. It doesn't. Control now lives with thresholds, with invisible conditions that decide when pressure turns into permission, when words turn into force, when watching becomes acting. This system no longer asks who is right. It asks how much damage is tolerated before response becomes justified. And that shift matters, because once violence is measured instead of condemned, the center of gravity moves, away from diplomacy, away from restraint, toward automated escalation. In this frame, restraint isn't moral, it's strategic, and strategy can expire. What looks like caution is often calculation. What sounds like warning is often rehearsal. The public hears noise. The system hears signals. And signals don't need consensus. They only need to cross a line. The danger isn't that someone will act too fast. It's that the system now rewards waiting until action becomes unavoidable. That's the design, and once you see it, you can't unsee where it leads. For a long time, this didn't look like a change at all. It looked gradual, normalized, almost reasonable. Before, violence inside a country was treated as containment. Now, it's treated as a variable, something tracked, counted, compared against reaction. Before, silence meant disengagement. Now, silence is temporary. It's a pause while thresholds fill. That shift didn't happen overnight. It happened quietly, across statements that sounded conditional, across warnings that sounded restrained. And that's what makes it dangerous. Fast crises trigger resistance. Slow shifts rewrite expectations. When systems learn that pressure can accumulate without consequence, they don't stop. They adapt. They test. They push. They recalibrate. What used to be unthinkable becomes manageable. What used to provoke action becomes data. And once suffering is reduced to a number, the system doesn't ask why anymore. It asks one question only: is it enough? And the answer is never fixed. Then the system received its first real shock. Not theory, not warnings, evidence, bodies, numbers, a count that moved fast enough to be noticed, but not fast enough to force a response. People were killed, not one, not a few, enough to matter, including those who shouldn't have been anywhere near a line like this. At the same time, the enforcers bled too. Not symbolic losses, real ones. The kind that expose strain inside a machine that depends on obedience. This wasn't chaos. It was friction. And friction is what systems watch for, because friction tells you where pressure is building and where control is starting to slip. Publicly, nothing changed. No declarations, no interventions. But privately, the numbers were logged, compared, measured against thresholds that don't appear on any screen. And that's the most dangerous moment. When violence is no longer shocking, just informative. Here's what most people miss. This system doesn't run on outrage. It runs on leverage. Violence alone doesn't decide outcomes. Neither does protest. What matters is who absorbs the cost, and who gets protected from it. In this design, pain is distributed downward. Lives are spent at the edge. While pressure accumulates at the center, economic strain compounds it. When money tightens, loyalty becomes expensive. Security requires payment. Silence requires funding. Force has a payroll. That's where the real vulnerability lives. Not in speeches, not in slogans, but in the machinery that turns revenue into control. When that machinery stutters, everything else speeds up. Because systems can survive dissent. They can survive condemnation. They cannot survive sustained non-cooperation from the structures that keep them solvent. That's why threats don't aim everywhere. They aim where circulation happens, where movement can be interrupted, where control suddenly costs more than it returns. And once that balance flips, no warning sounds in advance, then the pressure spikes. Fast, uneven, unforgiving. Control responds with force. Force responds with resistance. Resistance exposes weakness. Lines blur. Orders arrive late. Signals cross. What was contained becomes mobile. What was hidden becomes visible. What was managed becomes volatile. Information slips past barriers. Not all of it. Just enough. Enough to show scale. Enough to show cost. Enough to show that isolation no longer works the way it used to. The system reacts by closing harder, shutting down, cutting off. But closure has a price too. Every restriction increases dependence. Every blackout increases attention. Every crackdown accelerates the clock. And clocks don't stop once they start. This is the phase where miscalculation matters most, where restraint looks like weakness, and force risks becoming permission, because now, everything is being watched, logged, timed, and the next move won't be announced in advance. This is where it stops being abstract, because the cost doesn't land on systems first, it lands on people, on routines that don't survive disruption, on families that plan days, not futures, on lives calibrated for stability that no longer exists. If you're watching this from the outside, it's easy to treat it like distance creates safety. It doesn't. What happens in moments like this doesn't stay contained to one place, or one population, or one generation. When force becomes the default response, it teaches everyone what the rules are now. It teaches what silence costs. It teaches what participation risks. It teaches how quickly protection disappears. And once people learn those lessons, they don't unlearn them. They adapt. They harden. They choose differently. Pay attention to this part. Because the decisions being made here aren't just shaping outcomes elsewhere. They're rehearsing a future. You may be asked to live inside. Once a system like this destabilizes, it doesn't ripple outward politely. It drags. Markets react before governments do. Allies hesitate. Adversaries recalibrate. Because what's unfolding here isn't just unrest. It's a signal that internal force and external response are no longer separate arenas. Borders stop acting like buffers. They act like seams. Information crosses them. Pressure crosses them. Expectation crosses them. And suddenly, decisions made in one place begin shaping risk everywhere else. That's when restraint becomes contagious. So does fear. Some actors slow down. Others rush forward. Everyone starts watching everyone. Not to intervene yet, just to see who blinks first. This is how local crises turn systemic. Not through explosions. Through alignment. When multiple systems quietly prepare for the same uncertain outcome. And once that happens, there's no clean reset. Only adaptation, or rupture. From here, the system doesn't move in a straight line. It splits. One path looks like adjustment. Pressure is absorbed. Violence stabilizes just below the line. Enough change to survive. Not enough to transform. The system bends. Barely. Another path is erosion. Control weakens unevenly. Compliance becomes selective. Institutions hold on paper, but lose authority in practice. Everything keeps working until it doesn't. And then there's rupture. That's the path no one announces. The one where thresholds fail all at once. Where economic strain, internal force, and external pressure converge faster than decision makers can sequence responses. Rupture doesn't arrive as collapse. It arrives as overcorrection, moves made too late, or too hard, or without consensus. And once that happens, the system doesn't get to choose the pace anymore. None of these paths are guaranteed. All of them are plausible, and the most dangerous part, you don't know which one you're on until the others disappear. Here's the part no one wants to sit with. Systems like this don't end when someone wins. They end when the rules stop functioning. What's being tested right now is whether violence inside a state can be turned into a permission slip outside it, whether thresholds replace judgment, whether escalation becomes procedural. If that happens once, it doesn't stay exceptional. It becomes reusable, and that's the danger. Not the speeches, not the threats, not even the force, the precedent. Because once the world learns that internal collapse can trigger external action, without a clear line, every future crisis starts closer to the edge. You won't always recognize the moment it begins. It won't announce itself. It will look familiar, manageable, temporary, until it isn't. If you want to understand what happens next, not just here, but everywhere this logic spreads, you need to keep following the system, not the headlines. Stay with this, because the next time this switch flips, it may not be far away.